Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to a Monday morning. It's lovely to see everyone here. We have some lovely new faces, and we have some faces that we haven't seen for a while, and it's just wonderful to be together. You know when you've had a week that feels like a month, that feels like a year? Yeah. I'm not sure where to start. And actually, it's particularly in terms of this class that I'm not sure where to start, because I had the privilege this week of listening to at least 5 classes really like connected to Emunah. Now, I do know that whenever you're thinking about a specific topic, that's kind of what you hear from the speaker. But it really has been just one of those weeks. We had the Aleinu conference, which is takes place every year. I'm not sure if they're going to, like, this might have been the last one, but it's all the different organizations that work in outreach and in communal work come together. And what was really powerful about this year was we actually met in Heaton Park Synagogue. It was an unbelievable day. I have to say, knowing that normally it's 2 days, but knowing that it was just one day, we were getting on the coach early in the morning, we were coming home late at night. I was thinking a bit like, it is a bit of a schlep, right? To go all the way to Manchester. And I feel terrible to say that because the people from Manchester come all the way to London all the time, right? It's much further. It's like, did you know that it's at least triple to go from Golders Green to Bushy than from Bushy to Golders Green? Ask my family, they'll all. So that definitely was, this idea of sitting on a coach. In the end, actually, we're very lucky. We got a lift on the way there and on the way back. So that worked really well. But even still, it was a long journey. And I could see the schedule, and there were a few speakers, and it wasn't like the kind of massive program that it's been in previous years, and always the highlight was a big dinner in the evening and the atmosphere. And we've had it quite a few times. It's been at the Grove and it was at Southampton Synagogue, and it just felt like, am I really taking a day out of, everyone knows the kind of week I was having, am I really going to take a whole day for this? And then I come there and everything is about what we talk about. And it was literally like, so one of the classes, Diane Zobin gave a class about going through difficult times and what the Torah learning around it is, which is always the part that I feel like I don't know enough about. And I messaged him something. So those of you who were with us last time or might have listened to the recording. So I think normally I get maybe 10 or 20 people listening to the recording. I think last week's one is, I haven't checked this morning, but over 100. You can imagine it's really been something that's spread around, because I think people just want anything to be able to hold on to at the moment. But Diane Zobin's shir was literally like, Elchanan said to me at the end of it, because he was there as well, he said, that's like 3 years worth of material for your Monday morning class then. And I asked Diane Zobin for the source sheets, which he's going to put together, but actually he offered to do a learning group for Rebbetzins, which came out of that class from my message and a few others. I'm like, that's amazing. So that's going to now develop. But one of the things I did ask him, because one of the parts from last week that I was really thinking a lot about, I'm not going to say I was disturbed about, but I was really thinking about, was this idea that someone shared that, sometimes Hashem makes mistakes. And I don't know if the quote was exactly remembered correctly. I don't know what the person who supposedly said it was going through at the time. Obviously, it was a big tragedy that was going on, but the statement itself didn't sit right with me. But one of the things that Diane Zobin was saying was that it's important to have like a toolkit of philosophies to understand. There isn't like one, bumper sticker, easy way to understand things. And it made me reflect a little bit. We do talk about you are where you're meant to be. And I know you asked me, well, was this young lady where she was meant to be? Like, is that the way that we look at things? And what Diane Zobin said is, it's really important not just to have like an easy, put in a box, tie with a bow, there you go, there's your answer, now you understand what goes on in the world. Like, there are different philosophies and there are different ways of understanding things. And one of the things he shared was from the Rambam, which has a very, very different approach. I'm not sure if we'll go into it today, but it definitely doesn't say that everything that happens to us was, exactly like pre-planned and positioned, and you're put exactly where you're meant to be. Now, I know a lot of us find that really helpful to think about being exactly where you're meant to be when you're meant to be there. But sometimes that's not so helpful. And sometimes having things packaged up in a neat box and tied with a pink ribbon kind of thing doesn't make us think about the question enough and doesn't let us sit with the question. And that was really Dayan Zobin's underlying message to us, was he couldn't possibly have covered all the material in the short time that he had. But it was more about thinking about, we need to sit with questions sometimes. It's not just about easy answers or things that just sit nicely with us and then we can go to sleep at night. Actually, the questions are so powerful. And one of the things that he said, which actually anyone who came to when Iris Chaim spoke here, the mother of Yotam, the Gingy boy who was shot mistakenly when he escaped as a hostage, but she said, she shared this idea as well. One of the ways that we can ask the question why in Hebrew is lama, right? Lama means why. And when you don't give an easy answer to lama, and he was talking to us obviously as rabbis and Rebbetzins, people giving pastoral care. So sometimes someone can say to you why, and it might feel more comfortable to say because that was the amount of time that person was meant to be here, or because they had a special soul that got sent to the world, or lots and lots of different reasons that we could give. But what Dayan Zobin was saying, and what Iris actually said as well, sometimes when you sit with the lama, with the why, you can actually turn it into something called lama, which is for what? For what purpose? Right? So you might never answer why. Why did this thing happen? But what am I going to do with my life because of what happened? And that's such a powerful message. And if I think about some of the most incredible charities and organizations that were set up in the world, and for sure here in the UK, and people that I know personally, they went through things that I don't know if you could ever answer why. But look what they did with that. Lema. For what? What did they make that become? And I've shared here before, one such example was a friend and colleague of mine in America, and I think I showed you the book that she wrote. She lost her son very young as a baby, and through all her challenges and questions, she now works for the Chevra Kadisha and teaches about it, and has looked into the soul and teaches us the depth of understanding of what happens from all the things she went to. So no one's ever going to say, well, that's why you went through this, or it was worth going through this. That we can never say. But look for what she did with it. Lema, for what she did with that. Someone else that I know who didn't have children for a very long time set up an amazing organization to support and help couples to have children. And then the child that they did have has severe special needs. They've now set up an organization that helps parents with children with special needs. Lema, for what? So I think sometimes sitting with that why question could actually be really helpful to us. It's painful. And sometimes we answer things because we just want to help the person with the pain. What was clear from what the Dayan said, and from what I shared last week as well, actually, is Hashem definitely does have a plan and a will, and there's nothing that happens outside of that. So that, my conviction last week, and I said I don't think, but I checked with the Dayan, there is no Jewish philosophical source that says that sometimes Hashem makes mistakes. And I don't feel comfortable that we could exist in a world where sometimes Hashem makes mistakes. We don't. But difficult things happen that we can't explain is something that we have to live with. And I think trying to explain everything away. And there are these beautiful Hasidic stories about I think there was once a story of a young child who passed away at the age of 3, and the Rebbe shared with them through his level of prophecy and connection that Avraham grew up in a household of idolatry till he was 3, and this little boy was the reincarnation of Abraham's soul, and he came into the world for 3 years to be raised by this incredible family, to be surrounded by Judaism, and he fulfilled his mission, and now his soul is complete. So there are stories and there are situations where that can be shared, but most of us nowadays, do we know things like that? Almost all of us. Prophecy doesn't exist, right? We don't have prophecy anymore. So we don't know. We don't know why difficult things happen. But lema, for what? That's something that we can connect to. So I will come back to hopefully today to talking about and some of the other things that happened in Heaton Park. I also want to talk just briefly. Yesterday we left our home, the second Shabbat finished, and we got on the train, and then we got on the Eurostar. And yesterday morning we spent one of the most difficult and most beautiful mornings, probably ever, but definitely since I've been in this role as a Rebbetzin, with the Nidam family. And I don't want to share too much because actually, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to actually pause the recording for a second. I'm still not going to share too much. So we were actually in an executive meeting, let's say at the end of the executive meeting, so I wasn't checking my messages throughout. But I got a message from the mother from Sophie to ask about the Shloshim, because they're going to, please God, be holding it here. And I asked Elchanan to work out the days exactly when you calculate it from when the Shloshim will be. And I messaged back to Sophie, and a minute later she wrote back to say, that's Charlotte's birthday. So we will be marking Charlotte's 16th birthday, and she had such wonderful plans of what she was going to do for her 16th birthday, for when she finished school, for what she wanted to do in life. But we're going to be marking her 16th birthday here together, and with all her friends. The family are going to work out with us. I think they might have some time for the friends to come, some time for the community to come. I know not everyone remembers them, but we can all show them love. They were part of our community. People asked me, did we know them well? We knew them really well. First of all, we did both of their daughters' bat mitzvahs. I learned with both of the families. Second of all, I don't know any other French family in our community. They really stuck out in such a positive way. Everyone remembers their Devar Torah. Everyone remembers, whoever was here on that Shabbat remembers how elegant all the French ladies looked in their amazing dresses that Shabbat, right? It was very French. And then we stayed for the lunch as well, so our kids knew them as well. So, as I said, even within the challenges, sometimes we can see glimpses of maybe glimpses of light. Please go.
There is so much when somebody does die that you then reach out, whether it's your own being or there's something about doing them enables us to grieve in a way.
So I think that's part of grief, when you just don't know what to do, and then having a reason. And charity, definitely. I mean, it's amazing how much you see people, and we try to do this, and actually from a Jewish perspective, giving tzedakah in memory of someone's soul elevates their soul. It's a beautiful thing to do. But yeah, I think you're right. I think the needing to do something, and needing to do something positive, and actually even the laws around grieving and bereavement. And it was really interesting for us because they're a Sephardi family, so their laws are very different. And French, Sephardi, maybe Tunisia, Morocco, I can't remember, but they didn't. I'm not sure if they have the same customs as us. I'm not sure because it was in France. They weren't sitting on low chairs. I don't know, maybe you could say, is that an Ashkenazi?
You normally sit on low chairs.
Okay. And then tearing the clothes, is that?
Yeah, no.
Okay, so I don't know. So, but I mean, one of the things that you definitely would have laughed at, Sus. I know it's funny to bring like moments of amusement in such a difficult thing, but they gave Elchanan the tremendous kavod of praying Shachrit and Mincha. I can hardly follow their siddur. The words are completely different. He did all right, but what's beautiful as well, and Sass will know this, but they say, and David as well, they say every word so you can follow along, and they sing all the words and everyone's sitting together. But the Kaddish is different, the Amidah is different, everything was different. But yeah, it felt a tremendous privilege to be there, I have to say. It felt so special to be able to be with the family. And we were debating backwards and forwards whether we should go for the funeral. I'm so pleased we went when we did, because it was really quiet. We had the time with the family. What was beautiful is that the daughter Lena was surrounded by friends, and you could see the parents had so much comfort for them, laughing and talking, and obviously there's serious moments as well. But it's hope. And that's always the idea of holding on to hope. As I said, I've had a very full week, so I'm going to be jumping between things. But there are so many parts that I wanted to share. And I want to share with you that on the way back from France, so we ended up seeing a message very shortly before our train. No, we were going to go get some treats from Paris, because there's an amazing kosher chocolate shop called Damiel. I don't know if anyone knows it. It's like the green one anyway. So we were going to try head there. We timed it perfectly, head there and then go to the train. As we're on the way, Elchanan got a text message saying your train's been cancelled. You can quickly try and book. So we could either have booked a later train, or we could have booked the earlier train. And I really wanted to get back to London, and I'll tell you why in a second. So he booked the earlier train. We got there just as they were closing the thing. So we made it. We got on the train. Perfect. Why did I want to get back? Last night in Kinloss, there was a talk by an organization from Israel, which is called, I think, Taharat HaMishpacha, which means family purity. And their mission is to build mikvaot around Israel, specifically in more secular areas. And what they've been seeing is since October the 7th, so many secular women want to go to the mikvah. So there was definitely was a big fundraising evening. They're trying to get women to sign up on a regular basis to be supporting this charity. Please God, when we start building our own mikveh, it's something we're going to look to do as well. It's a big undertaking, and it's something that's an amazing opportunity for our community and wider community to support that this is something we should have in a community. In fact, they say the halacha is you can sell a Sefer Torah in order to build a mikveh. So it's interesting that our Sefer Torah actually you're meant to build a mikveh before you build a shul. So it's interesting that we're building a Sefer Torah, we're talking about building a shul, but a very central part of that, please God, Bushi should also have. The largest community in the United Synagogue needs a mikveh. That's part of what Jewish life requires. So anyway, this was that evening. Now, the reason that I wanted to go was twofold. First of all, one of my incredible teachers from SEM, who's called Rebbetzin Tarshish, was speaking there. So I'm going to just share with you a very yeshiva-centered joke for a moment, so you have to bear with me. In the morning, we say blessings, and part of the blessings that we say is that you didn't make me a slave, you didn't make me a non-Jew, and you didn't make me, for men say, you didn't make me a woman. Now, we're not going to go into why it's not derogatory, but I know people think it isn't. But what we're talking about when we say, do not make me a slave. So the way that Elchanan said he was explaining this in yeshiva, when you say that you didn't make me a non-Jew, really what we're saying is thank you for making me Jewish, but we say it in the negative. So you didn't make me a non-Jew. His rabbi in yeshiva said to him, don't think of, some down and out homeless person, thank you for not making me that. You have to think, thank you for not making me Bill Gates, let's say, or, some really high-end, sophisticated. Even that I don't want to be. I'm so grateful that I'm Jewish, right? So when you say thank you for not making me a woman, so the joke was, you're not meant to just say thank you for not making me whoever, but someone like Rebbetzin Jacqueline, who is learned beyond. Her husband teaches in the Mir Yeshiva, which is one of the largest yeshivas in the world, one of the most prestigious. And he says he's met a few people who can learn as well as his wife. Okay, so just to give you like the kind of context, she is unbelievable, this woman. So I for sure wanted to go to hear her speak, and her speech did not disappoint. I'm really blessed that I was there, and please God, again, it will be something that I will share. I said I've got too much this week, too many different opportunities, too many people that I heard from. But at the end of the evening, we met Julia Kupperstein, the mother of Bar. You'll all remember one of the hostages who was released, his father was in a wheelchair, and he stood up, and we've shared that picture of him, and we've shared how Elkanah drew him in captivity, a picture saying, your father will stand. This lady is amazing. I've got some pictures on my phone, so I'm going to have to share it with you afterwards. But if you'll remember, I'm going to recap, because to hear it from her again was just unbelievable. And her main message was Tamid B'yad Hashem, that we are always in the hands of God. Now, how that sits with the first bit of what I was talking about, it's not the same as saying every time it's easy to explain why you're meant to be, but everything is God's plan. You're always in God's hands. I'm going to remind you of the story that happened to her. She came with a lady who had met her at Hostage Square, and this was a Haredi lady, an ultra-Orthodox lady who runs an organization that learns with people. So the whole idea is, if anyone's heard of Phone and Learn, that's the English equivalent, an amazing organization. If you want me to put you in touch with them, you get a chance to learn one-on-one with someone. I know there's people in the room who have been doing this for years. It's an amazing, amazing opportunity to learn anything you want. You want to understand the Siddur better, you can learn that. You want to understand philosophy better, you can learn that. You want to understand some laws better, you can do that. You want to discuss some complicated things going on in the world, you can do that. Anything you want, you can learn with a one-on-one partner. It's amazing. So they had been connected through this. And Julia, I think 9 or 10 years ago, became Balat Shava. She became religious. And she said actually that I think she might have been at this Gitti's house for a Shabbat or something like that. Or she was with her. And she said, quickly come here. And she could see she was shaking. And she said, the terrorists are on the phone. Okay, so this was while Bar was in captivity. The terrorist was on the phone. He had called her mobile. And he said to her, do you ever want to see your son alive again? If you ever want to see your son alive again, you have to campaign to the government. You need to be seen more. We need to see that you're doing more. You need to go and, stop the IDF, whatever, all these crazy things that he was saying to her. And she said, Gitti said both of them were just shaking. You cannot even imagine. This is the terrorist who is with her son talking to her on the phone. And Julia said to him, she said, no. She said, my son is not in your hands. My son is not in Hamas's hands. My son is in God's hands. And she said, and even more than that, you are not. Sorry, even more than that, you are in God's hands. And the terrorist said to her, you're right. And they hung up. The terrorist said to her, you are right. It's just, I've shared this story before, but I can't get my head around that. And then the crazy thing she shared as well was with, I can't remember the details. I actually videoed it, but I can't remember the details. But at a certain point, they said to her son something. And he replied to them, oh, I think maybe what it was when they were saying that 3 of the terrorists had been killed. So they were going to kill 3 of them, and they played games with them, you three, or rearranging them, whatever it was. But I think it was at that point he said Shema, And he said, we're in God's hands. And Gitty said to Julia, is that something he heard you say at home? And she said, no, we lived with faith, but it wasn't like we said that expression. It wasn't the way we spoke. But somehow he felt or knew, or they connected to know that you're in God's hands. They made bracelets at the time that I think had those words on, and I really wanted to figure out how to get some. So that's going to be our next project. We might have to get Shana onto that one, but so that we can have to remind us that we're always in God's hands. And when Bar came out, he had a massive Israeli flag that had those words written on it, on his back, like you could see. And one of the things that Bar shared was his one dream while he was in captivity was he wanted to survive so that he could go and put on tefillin at, I think it was 6:26 in the morning, I think, at the Nova site, because that's when he was taken. And his dream was to go back there and to put on tefillin. And the first thing he did when he was released from hospital was he went to the Nova site to put on tefillin, and there was a beautiful video of him there. But that was his dream. And Julia said it wasn't like he put on tefillin every day beforehand, right? That wasn't really his path. I mean, they had a tough life. He went. The reason he was at Nova was because he was working. He was working 2 jobs because his father was disabled. He'd been in a terrible accident and he couldn't work. So Bar was the oldest of 5, and he had to help support the family. So he took on extra work while he was in the army. And amazingly, Julia really led the religious side of the hostage families. One of the things that she did was she had someone put on tefillin every day for one of the hostages, someone who wouldn't have otherwise worn tefillin, putting on tefillin every day while the hostages couldn't. One of the things she did was she took the families to different places, both in Israel and outside of Israel, to pray. One of those that we shared was in Hungary, where they were singing that song about even in the darkest I've just blanked on the name of the rabbi. What was his name? Reb Shailer, to go to his grave. And one of the things, are you okay? Do you need a drink? So that and the song that they were singing was this song of, even in the darkest of times, and that I'm going to stand up, and that was the song that his father sang. Just amazing. That's actually another thing that I did this week. You'll remember that I spoke to you about going to the Shotzer Rebbe's grave, and we said that when Shabbat comes in a bit later and the weather's a bit nicer, we'll go. So I did go this week, and with someone who asked me to go with them. And again, Friday morning, if you remember, there were snowstorms being threatened. Thankfully, we're all okay, right? But it was heaving, people coming to pray at the Rebbe's grave. But Julia was the one that was leading in terms of a lot of the families were secular. Actually, where Bar was, he was speaking as well about, he was with Ohad Ben Ami, who was secular from a kibbutz, and they were with some other guys who knew a bit more. And, the way that on Friday nights, they would sing and sing and sing together, raising the roof, Bushy style, right? This amazing things that they did while they were there. But honestly, meeting Julia was amazing. Now, you'll know that I've gone whenever one of the hostages comes and speaks, I'm there, right? We changed our train, or we booked our train tickets because I couldn't miss this opportunity to meet this incredible woman. But then the most amazing thing was, straight after she'd finished speaking, they had big screens up, like near the front. And straight after she finished speaking, she kind of walked to the side, and I was sitting here and she was there. And then they started doing the raffle, and I hadn't bought a raffle ticket, but also I didn't care about the raffle. So I went behind the screen and I explained to her my broken Hebrew. So she spoke in English, but she'd obviously prepared it, but it was tricky for her to speak in English. but my Hebrew was not what it needed to be. But I tried, and I said to her that every Monday morning we have a group of people that meet and talk about Emunah. And I said, and we know everything about your story, and we talk about it and we share. And I did try afterwards to see if we could get her to come here, but she's got such a busy schedule, and I just felt like we can't schlep this poor woman. It's tough for her to have to talk. But I just wanted her to feel all of our love, so I gave her a big hug from all of us. But this lady is amazing. It was to have been with a family in the morning that are incredible, going through such a hard time. To be with this lady in the evening who went through such a difficult time. And now we all said together, Mizmar LeTodah, that special psalm of saying thank you. We all came together and we said that together. What a day. What a day. And that was just within, those hours.
I find it interesting that your train was cancelled. But would that train have got you back to Kinross anyway? But if not, but if not, if it wouldn't have done, then something was wrong.
We could have got the later train, and I knew we would have missed it. I mean, I would have probably still got there for the end for her speech, but I wanted to hear Rebbetzin Tarshish as well. But the reason we booked that train originally, so the train we booked was, I think, at 6:12. And the reason we booked that was so that we should have a little bit of time in Paris after we'd gone to the Shiva, just a bit to have something time together, also to decompress. It's intense, and it was lovely. We went out together, like we really had. I wanted to go to the chocolate shop. I'm still not very happy about that, but it's okay. But what's interesting is that train was cancelled, and then the train we did get was delayed. So actually we ended up only leaving at like 6:05, I think. So it was pretty similar timing, but you're right, like I needed to be in Kinloss when I was there, and I literally got there at 8 o'clock when the thing started, and it was from events, so of course it started late.
Was the cemetery in Paris? Was it a very, very large cemetery with different faiths?
So I didn't go for the funeral, but I watched the funeral. I can say something about the funeral, actually. I didn't go to the funeral, but I watched the funeral on Zoom. And this is interesting because obviously, like everyone, our week is planned before things like this come in, right? So I actually had a meeting in Headroom Cafe at 9, and I had a meeting at 12:30, and the Levaya was at 11 or 11:30, I can't remember. What are they? They're 1 hour ahead of us. Sorry, so it was at 10 or 10, but at 10. So I had the Levaya was at 10. And because I don't drive, I don't have a car that I can sit in, but actually my part of Headroom Cafe, any of you who know it, it's a lovely place if you ever want to go. It's run by Jamie. It's a really, really great place to be and base yourself and have meetings, and they've got great food too. So the part of Headroom Cafe that I was in was actually quite empty. The other side was quite busy. I think it was even empty, I have to say. And I sat there with my phone, watching a Levaya with tears streaming down my face. And I felt like I was there. And I think they said that there were maybe 800 or 1,000 people at the Levaya and over 600 people watching on Zoom. So the family felt that they were being very much loved. And the grace and the beauty that every single one of them spoke. So the rabbi spoke in French, and this is lovely as well. The rabbi was, so because the Nidams have moved around a lot, this was a rabbi that they were connected to, which was so nice for them. He taught Sophie when she was a young girl. So that was the person who spoke at the funeral, which was very comforting. And he was actually there at the Shiva when we were there as well. So it's very comforting that he's there. He didn't have, like, he wouldn't necessarily have been. He's only moved back to Paris recently. And I couldn't understand what he was talking about, because even though I did 5 years of French, I don't really know very much French. But I did pick up one thing. I believe he spoke about Aaron's sons. Those of you who were here last week, we spoke about when Aaron's sons died. And I got comfort from that. But, you know, that's the reply. And actually, when we were at the Shiva, Michael said as well that the answer is silence. Each of them said to me, there are no words. It's so easy to quickly try and come up with something to say. It's so easy to come up with, even that I'm so sorry for your loss. Like, does that even encapsulate anything? Is that helpful? Maybe. Sometimes though, what we say helps us, but actually silence and just being there for someone in silence is so powerful. So that was something that the tiny bit that I understood what the rabbi said. Then Marie-Sophie, the mother, spoke so beautifully in French. So I didn't understand what she said, but just you could see the grace, what she shared. And then really amazingly, Michael, her husband, said the same thing in English. So then everyone could understand what she had said. And her sister Charlotte's sister Lena spoke beautifully. Now, I don't know how many people here have siblings. I'm blessed to be one of 6. My children are one of 5. They're blessed to have both. In both cases, we have large families. Elchonan's blessed to be one of 3. He has 2 sisters. We all love our family and they all drive us crazy. And what I said to Elchonan after the Levaya is, you know, to hear the way that these sisters loved each other was extraordinary. And even if you are very, very close to your family, or if your kids are very, very close, and I know most people aren't, you know, like I can tell you the dynamics in every family are always complicated. But even if you are, to hear the way that Lena looked up to her younger sister and learned from her, and she was wise beyond her years. I remember when I taught her when she was 11, she was wise beyond her years. And the most beautiful part of what Lena said was not to leave the funeral sad. She wanted all of us, and this is what I said. I can say this week. I couldn't say this last week, but to be able to leave with the light that she was, to be able to take some joy, to be able to take some positivity, because that's what Charlotte would want. She was always laughing and smiling. That's who she was. She doesn't want anyone to walk around depressed because of her. That's not what she wants. That's what Lena said, is like to take her light. And what was beautiful at the Shiva to see was that's what Lena's doing with her friends. Of course they're grieving and they're laughing and they're looking after each other and they're being young people, which is just wonderful and which gives us hope. When we went to Heaton Park, there were many, many powerful parts. But and I actually have some letters to read this week, but I'm going to keep them for next week, just because I said I want to just share this last part with you while it's still fresh in my mind, even though it's not really fresh because Wednesday feels like a year ago, I told you. But anyway, we went to Heaton Park. The last part of it was Rabbi Daniel Walker, who's the rabbi of Heaton Park, spoke to us. And there was a few things that he said that really resonated and that I felt were really powerful messages for us as a group to take with us. Now, what's interesting about Rabbi Walker is he's definitely one of those like funny guys, like he makes lots of jokes when he's speaking. And you could see that that's his way of coping with what happened. We were inside the shul where he would have been standing when it all happened. So when he's pointing and saying that door and that wall and that place and that man, he's there. You could see he was there, but he also was making a lot of jokes about things. That's his way. And he said that he's traumatized and he's working through the trauma, but that's part of his way of coping, is to make jokes about things. But what he shared with us, which was really interesting, and I really took this because I think every one of us has ways that this can resonate with us. today even, I'd say every one of us can walk out of here with this as a lesson. I think it's so powerful. He said for whatever reason he missed most of the chief rabbi's pre-Yamim Noraim conference, which is where he would normally get all of his ideas for his sermons for Yom Kippur. And he was kind of a bit uneasy about it, but it was okay because on what day was Yom Kippur this year? Was it Thursday? Okay. So thank you. It was fine because on Wednesday he blocked out that Erev Yom Kippur was going to be, he was just going to knuckle down, and he's quite good at last minute putting it all together. He was going to pull together his sermon. And then he had 2 levayas on Erev Yom Kippur. So as he came into Yom Kippur, I'm married to a rabbi, but you don't need to be married to a rabbi to think how stressful it must be to come into Yom Kippur. He said he had his Kol Nidre sermon, but to come into Yom Kippur with 1 sermon when you're meant to have 5. You could just imagine, like, this is the big night of the year, the whole community. That's pretty stressful. And he said, I think on Yom Kippur, so in the evening, he'd taken a lot of books so that he could review them and try to put something a bit more proper together. And he had got up early as well to try to put things together. But you can imagine, like, this is the lesson that I think we can all walk out of thinking about. The big stress in life, the tiger in the room, was the fact that he has to speak to his community and he hasn't prepared his sermons. Right? That's really stressful. I'm not minimizing it. That's really, really stressful. Because he hadn't prepared his sermons, he'd stayed home a little bit longer, I think, to try to put things together. And he was walking to Shul at a later time. What he shared with us was that the terrorist, and I can't remember the word he used to describe the evil individual. I think he used a phrase that we would use to talk about like Satan or something like that, really, like the way he described him. But the terrorist had actually was like loitering around the shul at around 9 o'clock in the morning. And he asked maybe someone on CST or security something about Rabbi Walker. It was very clear that he knew who the rabbi was, and actually that was his target. Now, Rabbi Walker came to Shul later. He came to Shul 20-something minutes later, I think. And not at 9 o'clock in the morning. He came just before the service started. So already that, thinking about that and how he has to walk around with that knowledge now, but, what would have happened if he would have been walking there at 9 in the morning? What did happen, because, a lot of very challenging thoughts, but also seeing the divine protection. And again, if you imagine when he walked into Shul that morning, I think he was also laning, and he said to Yoni Finley, who was the guy who was shot but has survived, who was davening Shacharit at the time, would you also do laning? Because he also had to do laning, and Yoni said that he wouldn't do the laning for him. But he was joking a bit around about that, went up to a few people. What's amazing, he said as well, is at that time in the morning, and you'll know from here, anyone who's here that early on in Yom Kippur, as the service starts, he said, I think that there were about 40 people in this massive shul. He said if the terrorist would have had any brains, he would have come at 10:30 or 11 o'clock for Yisco. Outside, there would have been hundreds of children. He said there would have been hundreds of teenagers, because the teenagers, he said, apparently coming to the Shul campus means you've been to Shul on Yom Kippur for teenagers, right? So you'd have hundreds of teenagers. You would have had a jam-packed full Shul. What he pointed out to us, it wasn't there, it was like there, but I'll show you over here, was if you imagine that there's a little fire exit door over here. So they had a door, and just 5 minutes beforehand, I think he said, someone had bought the Sefer Torah that they'd used in another minyan, had brought it back inside and left the door open because, they're inside a secured campus. So left the door open, and 2 minutes beforehand, someone had closed that door. Easy access. He also said something amazing as well. He said after they rammed inside and the terrorist was banging on the door. He also said if he had half a brain, you go run around and find somewhere else. He said when the police came, all you had to do was kick some of the doors and you could come straight in. Obviously now they're reinforcing everything and everything is increased. But if you want to look and the terrible tragic loss of 2 lives, and the people who are injured and what they have to live with, and all the people who are there and the trauma that they're going through. But what could have been, you can't even put your head there, right? But to me, I think one of the, as I said, so many incredible messages. But the one that I would like to try to walk around with this week is, can you imagine on Yom Kippur morning when Rabbi Walker woke up and he thought that the biggest disaster of his year probably was the fact that he hadn't prepared his sermons for Yom Kippur. And Hashem said to him, like, really, that's your biggest worry? So I think to me, especially because we've been speaking quite a lot in recent weeks about anxiety and this idea of that big tiger in front of us, just was so helpful to try to put that in perspective. What that big, scary, all of us get overwhelmed and all of us get worried about things. And even, even from yesterday morning, how, most parents that, you would be scared to send your kid to Israel because of what's going on. You'd be scared to send your kid into town because of what could happen to them. Anti-Semitism here. They were in a beautiful Swiss skiing resort, surrounded by friends and family, and 100 meters away. Of course, we need to do whatever we can to deal with all the challenges and protect ourselves and, try to, like I said, not having sermons for Yom Kippur isn't a tiny deal. It is a big deal. But actually, I think to just whatever are overwhelmed this week, and I think especially in January, right? There's a reason why they talk about Blue January, especially in January. There's some really challenging things about January. Anyone who's on a salary that gets paid at the end of the month will know that we got paid before Christmas. So by the time, my kids even know this, by the time you get to the second week in January, there's a bit of a problem, right? Like, we joke with them, right? It's going to be toast for supper every night. For me, it's not normally. It's normally like all the things that are stuck in the back of the freezer that I've ignored. Like, oh, look what we have. And they'll be like, what is that weird thing? I'm like, it's mystery soup. I'll make something on Shabbat, freeze it, and then leave it in the freezer forever. But we know January is a tough month. I think there's something very special about January in that, like, there is a newness. And I can see I've overrun, but I'll share with you a beautiful idea. The youth were talking about New Year's resolution. So sometimes my wonderful children like to show how controversial they can be, maybe, should we say. We don't believe in New Year's resolution. That's Christian. It's not Jewish. So fine, don't say New Year's resolution. I think it was a lovely activity to kind of say what everyone wants to do. But then what I shared with them, I heard a great clip from a video. Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, who was one of the greats in America of the previous generation. I shouldn't say previous generation because I think he might have been alive while I was alive, but he's not alive anymore. So he was one of the previous greats in America, Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky. His grandson was one of Elchonen's rabbis in Yeshiva. Very, very, like one of the greatest of the great. If you've heard of Rav Moshe Feinstein, he was the other one. So like the two of them were the real, like, Gedolim, the greatest rabbis in America, when there were lots of great rabbis, but they were really very great. So Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, someone once asked him, are we meant to make New Year's resolution? Because it's not, I mean, New Year is Christian, right? What are we celebrating? What are we marking? And he goes, what? The rest of the world are going to be doing teshuvah. They're going to be repenting. And we're not going to? Everyone else is trying to be better, and us, the Jewish people, aren't. Like, of course you can. So there is something about January and its new beginnings and hope, maybe, but it's also cold and it's also miserable, and the month does seem to go on forever. I still something about January goes on for so long that it stole a few days from February, right? But whatever each of us is going into this week, whatever challenge we're going into this week, because nobody gets through life without challenge. So everyone has something that's on their mind for this week, something that they need to do, something that they're worried about, something that they're excited about maybe. I just wanted to like bring it into that perspective. Thank God terrorist attacks don't happen every day in Manchester, in London, anywhere, right? Thank God. There are awful things that happen sometimes, but thank God that's not what we're normally dealing with. But just to, when we're feeling that like overwhelm and that just how will I manage this week or this day or this hour or these 5 minutes? Let's just bring it back into that space of that you can and you will. And let's take the message of whenever we're thinking like, why is this happening to me? The lama, why? Let's take that message and let's try and move it to lama. For what can I do with this challenge that I'm going through? What Rabbi Walker's doing with the challenge that he's gone through is amazing. He inspired a room of rabbis and rebbetzins that will now all go and inspire their communities. What the Nidam family are doing in their quiet, beautiful, graceful way is an inspiration for the world, right? All of us, the fact that they're not running to the media and they're not, you know, there's this beautiful internality of family life. And each one of us, whatever challenge we go through, for Julia Kipushkin as well, how she has this mission of being able to show us that we are in God's hands. Each one of us should go through this week, please God, with each challenge as it comes up, to try to put it into the perspective of this is a challenge that I can grow from. And hopefully next week, I've got lots of material, but keep sending them in. It's great to be able to share. Like I said, I'm sorry I didn't read out what was sent in this week, but we will share it for next week. Wishing you all a wonderful week.